Shortest job first, or SJF, is an algorithm in which the process having the smallest execution time is chosen for the next execution. This scheduling method can be preemptive or non-preemptive.
Shortest job first, non-preemptive. In non-preemptive scheduling, once the CPU cycle is allocated to process, the process holds it till it reaches a waiting state or terminated. It can improve process throughout by making sure that shorter jobs are executed first, hence possibly have a short turnaround time. In this example, we will start at time 0, since shortest job first prioritizes the process with the shortest processes. The priority will start with the task with shortest CPU bursts. So, the current time is 0. The only process that is currently arrived is P1. So P1 will go first, and it will go until time 8. Now, this is shortest job first non-preemptive, so it doesn't matter if another process arrived. P1 is going to finish its burst because it's not preemptive. Now, at time 8, we have in our ready queue P2, P3, and P4, since they all arrived while P1 is executing. So, we are going to continue to the next process based on the shortest CPU burst, which is P2 with its 5 burst time. And next, at time 13, we have P3, P4, and P5, all in the ready queue. So we will run P5 next until time 20, followed by P4 until time 29, and then lastly, P3 until time 39. And to compute their average waiting time, we have to add the waiting time for the prior processes and divide them at the number of processes. P1 has 0, P2 has 5, P3 has 25, P4 has 14, and P5 has 2. So, 0 plus 5 plus 25 plus 14 plus 2 divided by 5, the average waiting time is equals to 9.2 milliseconds.
In preemptive SJF scheduling, also known as shortest remaining time first or SRTF, jobs are put into the ready queue as they come. A process with shortest burst time begins execution. If a process with even a shorter burst time arrives, the current process is removed or preempted from execution, and the shorter job is allocated CPU cycle. Let's take a look at this example. So we have 5 processes with different arrival and burst times. So, since we have no process that arrive at time 0, this part of the Gantt chart will be colored into gray. And then at time 1, P1 has arrived. So, it has 6 burst times. And if this is an FCFS scheduling, P1 will have to execute all of its burst time until it finished. But since SJF preemptive scheduling will only execute those that has the smallest burst time, P2 will execute at time 2 because it arrived and it has the smaller burst time than P1. So P2 executed all of its burst time until P3 arrived at time 3 because P2 has smaller burst time than P3 when it arrived. So here is the representation of it. And then P4, even though it arrived at time 4, P3 still has a smaller burst time than it. So P3 continued to proceed into its execution other than P4. And then by time number 5, P5 arrived and it has a smaller burst time then P1 and P4. So it is the first to execute. And then once it finished executing, P1 and P4 has to compare all of its remaining burst times. So since P1 has executed one of its burst time here, it only has 5 remaining burst times. So it is equal with P4. And then P1 will then have to execute first its remaining 5 burst time like this. And then at time 19, P4 is the only remaining process that haven't finished executing yet. So it will execute and finish all the processes. So this is what this table will look like if it is turned into a Gantt chart. So now let's compute for the average waiting time. So the average waiting time is computed by subtracting all finishing time to arrival time and to the burst time. So P1 finished executing at time 18. Let's see here. Let's see if this is correct. So at time 18, P1 finished executing. And then it arrived at time 1. So there, it arrived at time 1 and it has a burst time of 6. So it has a waiting time, P1 has a waiting time of 11. So let's do all of that to all of the processes. So you will have this. You can compare it here to the Gantt chart. Let's check all of the finishing time. So P2 finished at time 6. So there it is. And P3 finished at time 9. Here. P4 finished at time 23. Here it is, the violet one. And P5 finished at time 13. The red one. So now, let us compute for the average waiting time. The average waiting time is computed by adding all of the waiting time of all the processes and subtracting it by the number of the processes that happened. So here, the given 11 plus 0 plus 3 plus 14 plus 4 is equals to 32. And then let's divide it to 5, and the answer is 6.4. So this 5 processes has an average waiting time of 6.4. So this is SJF preemptive scheduling. Thank you for listening.